This photograph was taken in 1883 at the Ravencroft Provincial Asylum in northern Vermont. The girl in the image is identified as Eleanor Ward, only 8 years old at the time. But look closely. Her posture is too rigid, her eyes too focused, too intentional, an expression that simply doesn't belong on the face of a child. The image has unsettled researchers for over a century, not because of what it shows, but because of what no one has ever been able to explain. Eleanor Ward defied every assumption 19th century physicians held about the human mind. More than 140 years later, her case remains one of the most perplexing and unsettling medical mysteries in American psychiatric history. To understand why this little girl became the subject of countless debates and investigations, we must first return to the world of 1883, a world far less compassionate than ours. The northeastern United States was still reshaping itself after years of rapid industrial expansion. Immigrant families from Scotland, Germany, and Norway filled cramped factory towns, hoping for a better life, but often finding only exhaustion and poverty. Mental health care was primitive at best, brutal at worst. Asylums were isolated stone buildings positioned on hillsides, far from the eyes of polite society, designed less for healing and more for containment. The Ravencroft Provincial Asylum, where Eleanor would spend the final years of her short life, was infamous even in its own era. Built on the grounds of what had once been a failed communal settlement, the institution carried a reputation for strange events long before Eleanor ever walked through its iron doors. Inside, the hallways echoed with the consequences of crude medical practices, chronic cold water immersions, forced restraints, sensory deprivation, and experimental treatments based more on superstition than science. It was in this harsh and deeply limited environment that Eleanor Ward's case began to unfold. Eleanor was born on April 9, 1875, in the lumber town of Brent Hollow, Vermont. Her parents, Samuel and Agnes Ward, were Scottish immigrants who had crossed the Atlantic seeking steady work. Samuel hauled timber for the rail companies. Agnes cleaned the homes of local mill owners while caring for Eleanor and her younger brother. The Wards lived in a tiny two-room cabin. Their life was simple, difficult, but filled with the comfort of routine. Eleanor grew up surrounded by Gaelic lullabies, the smell of pine from her father's clothes, and stories her grandmother wrote in thick, curling handwriting from the old country. Every available record, church notes, school logs, recollections from neighbors, described Eleanor as perfectly ordinary during her first 8 years. She was curious but quiet, easily amused by small things, frightened of the dark, and fond of chalk drawings on the front step. Her school teacher recalled her as polite, unremarkable, and sweet. Nothing, absolutely nothing, hinted at the storm that would soon follow. Until the morning of October 2nd, 1883, the day Agnes Ward later called the morning my daughter came back as someone else. Eleanor woke up unchanged in appearance. Same small frame, same light brown hair. But something far deeper had shifted. Something no one could name, and something no one would ever truly understand. The sudden transformation. The morning of October 2nd, 1883 marked the beginning of Eleanor Ward's transformation, one so profound and disturbing that no one in Brent Hollow would ever forget it. At first, the signs were subtle. Eleanor woke later than usual, something uncharacteristic for a girl who normally rose with the dawn. When she finally came down from her small attic room, she moved differently, slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed, as though she were imitating the motions of a much older person. She didn't greet her parents, didn't smile, didn't even blink in her usual restless way. Instead, she sat at the table and watched them silently. Agnes Ward later said her daughter's expression looked ancient, as if an adult with decades of experience were peering out through a child's face. When asked if she felt unwell, Eleanor answered, but her voice carried a faint rasp, still recognizably hers yet strangely aged. Impossible knowledge over the next several weeks, her transformation pushed far beyond personality changes. Eleanor began speaking about historical events with unnerving accuracy, battles, treaties, obscure political disputes, subjects she had never been exposed to in her rural upbringing. One evening, she casually described a naval skirmish from the early 1700s with such specificity that Samuel Ward dropped his fork in shock. When he asked how she knew these things, Eleanor simply replied, "I remember what others forget." Her knowledge was not limited to history. She referenced philosophical ideas far beyond a child's understanding, quoting thinkers whose works she had never seen and discussing them as if their concepts were obvious and familiar. Religious depth that defied explanation. Eleanor had attended church like every child in town, but now she began speaking about theology with disquieting sophistication. When the local preacher visited to check on her, she challenged him with questions he admitted he had never been asked, not even in seminary. She recited passages from old Gaelic religious texts the preacher himself had to look up later. Knowing things she couldn't possibly know, what truly frightened the townspeople was Eleanor's strange knowledge of the personal lives of others. She mentioned private arguments between neighbors, disputes they swore had occurred behind closed doors. She referenced small secrets, financial troubles, past mistakes, silent regrets, details no 8-year-old should have had any access to. Her comments were never cruel, but they were unsettlingly accurate. People in Brent Hollow began avoiding the Ward family home. A dark curiosity. As the months passed, Eleanor's interest shifted towards subjects no ordinary child gravitated to. She asked questions about aging, illness, and mortality, calmly, methodically, with a detachment that frightened her mother. Her tone was never gleeful or emotional. If anything, she behaved like someone studying the world from far outside it. Strange reactions from animals sensed something as well. The strays that once followed Eleanor around the yard no longer approached her. Dogs barked from a distance. Birds vacated feeders the moment she stepped outside. Even the Ward family's old barn cat hissed whenever she entered the room. One evening, Agnes asked why the animals acted so strangely around her. Eleanor smiled softly, too softly, and answered, "Because they hear what humans don't." The emergence of unnatural physical traits. By December, new developments emerged. Eleanor's strength seemed disproportionate for her size. She moved heavy objects without visible effort and endured cold winter winds with no reaction. Samuel once found her standing barefoot on the frost-covered porch, completely unaffected by the cold. Worse still, she sometimes remained motionless for hours, perfectly still, staring at a wall or an empty corner of the room, as though listening for something only she could hear. The eyes that no one could bear to meet. The most unsettling change was in her eyes. Neighbors described an intensity that made them uncomfortable, an unblinking, probing quality that felt less like a child looking outward and more like something looking inward through her. Agnes swore Eleanor's eyes sometimes appeared darker than before, as if their color shifted with her moods. Samuel admitted privately that, at times, he felt watched even after he left the room. Seeking help by early January 1884, the Wards were desperate. They turned first to Reverend Alistair Green, the town's longtime preacher. Green had known Eleanor since infancy and initially believed her behavior was merely an unusual phase. But when he met with her privately, his confidence evaporated. She spoke to him with a fluency in scripture he could barely keep up with. Then she calmly mentioned personal doubts he had confided to no one, not even his wife. Green left the house pale and trembling. Something had gone terribly wrong. something he believed was beyond medicine, beyond psychology, beyond anything he had ever witnessed. And so, reluctantly, he prepared to attempt a ritual he had only read about in old Scottish manuscripts, a ceremony rarely spoken of and almost never performed. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened the night he stood before Eleanor Ward.